I'm going to be talking today about a dead prediction market, which I didn't build. So I run Reality.eth, which is a crowdsourced smart contract oracle. I'm building a thing called Backstop Layer 2, which I will shill a little bit, but I'm mainly going to talk about Augur. So the fundamental problem that Augur is trying to solve, which has some very important design implications, is what we used to call at that time the oracle problem, right? So the problem is, how do you settle a market? So for Augur, it was something like, who won the 2020 US presidential election? But this is, so for them, it's very easy to make kind of a smart contract system to do all the trading, all the stuff that you do in a prediction market. But the fundamental problem of how you settle is this kind of serious crypto economic problem. So for them, it was a prediction market problem, but it has applications way, way beyond prediction markets. So anything where you need data from outside of the chain, right? Anytime you need truth on the chain, but also you have almost the same problem where you need kind of governance type of information. So I call it kind of truth and justice as the problem. So if you're trying to upgrade a contract and you need to know, is this upgrade malicious, then you've got just the same problem. So Eigenlayer now are calling this problem intersubjective work, by which they mean that there's information that everybody in the world knows, and people generally have a common idea of what the answer is, but the blockchain needs to know it. How does the blockchain know it? Okay? So I want to go through a few things that don't work, and these are things that are very widely practiced, sometimes for Oracle stuff, particularly for governance. And I'm going to go through a couple of things that don't work and then kind of build up to the Augur system that kind of does work, and then talk about maybe how we can improve on the limitations of it. So one thing you can do is token voting, right? So if you had the problem of, we've got a bunch of token holders, they have tokens in a prediction market, obviously they have an incentive to make that prediction market settle correctly, right? So when it comes to say who won the presidential election, they have the incentive to say it's Biden. The problem with this is, first of all, you can do a very simple, crude attack on it. You buy 51% of the tokens. Then you put a bunch of bets on Trump right at the end of the market when everybody realized that he'd lost. Then you use that to mis-settle, and you can steal all the money in the bets, right? But now that requires 51%, which obviously is quite a high hurdle. But you can also do much more kind of subtle things, like bribery attacks. And bribery attacks, in theory, can be very, very cheap. And they actually get worse, in a sense, the more decentralized you make them. Because if you're doing token voting, as an individual, the chances that your vote is actually going to flip the answer are not very high, right? So if you take the bribe and you vote to mis-settle the market, then it's likely that your vote will not actually swing it. Either it won't, the thing won't go through, it won't get mis-settled, and that will not cost you anything, so you'll get the bribe and nothing will go wrong. Or the other voters are going to vote to do it anyway. They're going to take the bribe, and then that will mean that even if you didn't take the bribe, you lose the value of the system, right? The system still breaks. So a decentralized system is kind of even worse from the point of view of token voting than a centralized system. If it's like three of us, it's much easier to coordinate. So then people might say, okay, let's add some incentives. Let's add token voting with slashing. The problem there is, okay, who are you going to slash, right? Who are you going to reward? Who are you going to punish? If you slash the minority, then you've kind of made the attacks even worse, because if the attacker can now just make a commitment that they are going to break the system, then the honest people are now incentivized to actually go with the attacker's dishonest solution. So, for example, you could make a contract that commits, that shows that you could pay the bribe, and say that if it goes through by a sufficient margin, you're not going to pay the bribe. So if you do that, then you get to reward the dishonest and punish the honest. So now we're going to get to the solution, which comes ultimately from Paul Stortz's paper Truthcoin, which I very recommend reading, which is we back the slashing with a fork. So what's going to happen is that if there is something that gets kind of escalated, I'll talk about escalation in a second, we're going to clone the entire prediction market and split the whole thing into two. So there's going to be one prediction market which thinks that Donald Trump won the election, and there's going to be another prediction market which thinks that Joe Biden won the election. And the great thing about this is that we can probably assume that a prediction market that settles incorrectly is worthless. So the tokens on the version that says that Trump won aren't worth anything, and the tokens on the version that says that Biden won are worth probably as much as the prediction market was worth before the fork happened. So the great thing about this is that the token holder's skin is fully in the game, right? Because if they say that Trump won, they're going to end up on the Trump fork, and there's no need for anything kind of objective for the blockchain to know what happened, right? People know what happened, and people value the better prediction market. So Vitalik calls this subjectivocracy, this mechanism, and it's kind of also what secures the base layers, right? So if, for example, we have a censorship attack against Ethereum, and 51% of stakers decide that they're going to censor blocks, they're going to reorg out Tornado Cash transactions, then what we'll do is we'll make another version of Ethereum where they get slashed, right, socially slashed. And if we do that, then the people are just going to decide which version they want to use. They can use the censored version where their transactions aren't guaranteed to get through, or they can use the honest version, the uncensored version, where their transactions won't get through. So it's just this same mechanism that secures the base layers, gives us this very extreme level of security for securing this application on top of the base layer. A couple of problems with this. Firstly, forks are very socially expensive, right? So we can't just fork the system for every single market, and we'll have like 10,000 different augurs. So what we do here is we just use the forking as a backstop. So we use an escalation game. Reality, by the way, is also an escalation game. It's not the one that Augur used, but it's the same mechanism. So people who pick one side are going to start by putting a little bit of money in. Somebody might say, I think Biden won, and here's a little bit of money I'm going to put in the system to back up my claim. Somebody else can then change that answer by putting up more money. In reality, if you have to double it. In Augur, it was this kind of custom series of dispute rounds. But anyway, so you get these ever larger rounds with ever larger commitments, and only when you get to a very high amount of money are you going to actually fork the system. So this worked really well in Augur as a backstop. There was never a need to actually fork the system. It never actually forked. And it was very good at correctly settling these prediction markets. Having said that, okay, but there's another problem, which is that the Augur users probably don't want to bet in Augur tokens, right? When we forked the prediction market, we were able to fork the Augur tokens, but they don't want to bet in those. They want to bet in Ether and DAI. And Augur can't fork Ether and DAI, right? So you need some kind of objective way for the blockchain to tell where should we put the Ether and DAI. So generally the forking, if the base layer forks, that's a subjective decision. People use whatever they want to use. But we have to get some objective choice about which one is better. So what the Augur guys did was they said the forkable token is the rep. You have to move your forkable token into one fork or the other. The majority will probably enter the most valuable fork. So then we can look at which has the most tokens going into it, and we can assume that's the truth. The problem is that now we've got an economic security bound. It's no longer a purely subjective system. Let's imagine that you've got $100 million worth of bets on Trump and Biden, and the Augur token is worth $10 million. Obviously, in that situation, it's still worth somebody's while to buy up half the Augur tokens or to do a bribery attack so that they can make the Ether and DAI go into the fork that says that Trump won, even though Biden won. So what they do in Augur is they say we're going to make sure we never hit that economic security bound. So they're going to measure what they call the open interest, so how much money is at stake. That's continually measured. You also measure the governance token value, and if the open interest threatens to get half as high as the value of the governance token, then we're going to do something about it. And what we're going to do about it is either we're going to raise the fees. And by raising the fees, we're going to either reduce the amount of open interest because it will dissuade people from betting on the system, or it will maybe increase the value of the token because the token holders are getting this revenue that comes from the fees. So a couple of problems with this, and I should say these are basically theoretical problems because Augur didn't fail for these reasons. Augur ultimately kind of didn't succeed in the marketplace, but it wasn't because of these. But if we're trying to use this mechanism more broadly, which I think we should be because it's kind of the only sound mechanism we have for governance, then there will be problems. So one is that these fees may actually be kind of impractical, right? So if you've got to make sure there's enough revenue coming in, people are incentivized to hold these tokens, and that's got to be, and the token value has got to stay half the whole market cap. That's quite a lot of money you may have to be paying in fees. And it may be that people just don't want to pay that many fees. I mean, if you look at probably a normal betting market, like a traditional bookmaker, will have a very small market cap compared to the amount of money they got in bets. That's generally how finance works. The other problem is parasitism. So somebody else can make a different market that avoids the fees, and they do the trading on their own market, and then at the end, when it comes time to settle the market, they just have a little market on Augur that nobody's betting on, and they read that off the Augur contract. So that way you can avoid the fees. This makes it even worse if you've had to raise the Augur fees, because potentially you then kind of push Augur into a death spiral where the token becomes increasingly worthless because it's going to get parasited off. And like I say, this is theoretical. This did not happen. The system worked. But we need to still worry about it. So that's basically what Augur did. I'm going to talk a little bit about alternatives and show my thing a little bit. One approach you might want to take is, what if we could make Ethereum forkable? Right? That would solve the problem. So we couldn't fork Ether and DAI, and that gave us this economic security bound. But if we could have forked Ether and DAI, then it would have worked, and we wouldn't have had to worry. So Martin Kopelman suggested this a long time ago, when Gnosis was still a prediction market platform. And but then what happened after that was we had like the ETH ETC fork, and that made people kind of leery of like base layer forks. Justin Drake kind of suggested having like price feeds enshrined in Ethereum consensus. That would have had the same result that if there was a dispute about price feed, Ethereum would have forked. Eigenlayer version 1, not the new thing I just brought out, but Eigenlayer version 1, if it had become too big to fail, would plausibly have had this effect, right? So if people had attacked Eigenlayer with all these staked ETH, and Eigenlayer was very much used, then it's quite possible that we've ended up having a fork of Ethereum to figure it out. And this is why so many people got mad at Eigenlayer when they tried to do this. Eigenlayer version 2 is quite cool and interesting. They have kind of a solution to the parasite problem in that what they say is, they kind of change the goal of the system. So instead of trying to get to the right answer, what they're going to do is they're going to allow people to insure against being on a fork with the wrong answer. And this means that if you haven't paid the insurance premium, then you may still get screwed. So this kind of may help with parasites. But it's potentially complex. I'd like to see how it works in practice. And it doesn't solve the basic cost issue that you need to be paying enough in fees to the to kind of the oracle to pay them not to steal your money when you're being governed by them. So just to say a little bit my thing, what we want to do is kind of more radical. So if we could fork Ethereum, that would solve the problem. But we can't fork Ethereum, so we want to make a new chain that we can fork, have that work as a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, so we have the maximum compatibility and the maximum composability with Ethereum, and any application on this chain will be able, after a sufficient escalation, to cause our chain to fork. And just like Augur, the forking is just a backstop. We don't expect it to happen all the time. It may well never happen, but having this backstop allows you to make crypto-economically secure governance and crypto-economically secure oracles with respect to assets that are native to that chain. If you want to bridge stuff from the layer 1 that can't be forked by this system, then you still have kind of an economic security bound, so you still have that limitation. Anyhow, so that's what we're doing about it. I've put a bunch of links on here. There's also a new design for Augur that Mikhail just came up with that I've hardly had time to process. And I've linked the Augur white paper there. I really would encourage everybody to read the Augur white paper, even if you're not interested in these mechanisms, even if you're not interested in this problem, just because it's such a good piece of work. It's very clear in laying out, what are the problems that this solves, what are the limitations, what are the assumptions. Okay, and there's also some stuff about backstop and reality ETH, and also links to Paul Schwartz's paper, which I think is absolutely fundamental to a lot of what we do on Ethereum that he doesn't get enough credit for. Okay?
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
So first of all, pardon me for not getting all the technical details from your talk, but I'm curious, what happens if the final decision is not clearly obvious in some cases, and there will remain people who believe in one decision, and then others will believe in another decision, and then maybe these forks will just grow and increase always?
Yep. So that's right. So you get an economic fork. It's the same thing that happened when, for example, when Ethereum and Ethereum Classic forked. Also, you know, some of the Bitcoin Cash forks, the same thing happened. I think generally what's going to happen is that it's going to end up fairly clearly on one side or the other. And the reason that usually happens is because there is a network effect that pushes things, right? So the same reason if you flip a coin, it hardly ever lands on its side, or like standing up. It normally falls one side or the other. So I think that's what's most likely to happen. But there is always the possibility that you'll have an economic fork. And that has some consequences for like sort of DeFi stuff and things like that. That kind of weird things happen if your token split exactly in two. That can do kind of weird things. This is also something that may happen to Ethereum, right? I know people often, this hasn't happened for a while, so people are kind of designing systems kind of with the assumption that Ethereum won't fork. But you don't necessarily go into these things on purpose, right? And the only governance we have that governs Ethereum ultimately is the ability for users to decide whether to accept an upgrade or whether to reject an upgrade, right? We don't have democracy. We don't have a governance process in Ethereum beyond, you know, some researchers with various potential conflicts of interest deciding among themselves what to do, which may or may not represent the users. So these systems, I think, are only really secure if they can fork. Our system will have a greater likelihood of forking, and also a greater likelihood of forking in a bad way, in a sense, of getting one of those 50-50 forks, than the base layer. And that's why people don't want to do this to the base layer. But I think it's a price worth paying to get, like, you know, solid governance, solid oracles.
All right, I think that's all with the questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation.